Okay. It's 2 minutes after noon. I want to say good afternoon to everyone. My name is Melissa Anderson. I'm the operations manager with Outsource IT Solutions Group. I'd like to welcome you today to the webinar where we're going to embark on a journey into the realm of cybersecurity fundamentals for libraries. We're thrilled to have you all here as we explore the intersection of knowledge, technology, and safeguarding our libraries. Libraries are more than just stacks of books and quiet reading corners. They're the heartbeats of our communities. In this digital age, libraries have evolved, embracing technology to connect partners and patrons with vast digital resources, ebooks, and online databases. But with this transformation comes a new set of challenges, cyber threats that can compromise the very essence of what libraries stand for. Our libraries hold troves of sensitive data, patron records, research archives, and intellectual property. Protecting this treasure trove is not just a responsibility, it's an imperative. Cyber events can disrupt library services, potentially compromising user privacy or even erasing centuries of knowledge. As stewards of this information, we must be vigilant, proactive, and informed. Today, we're honored to have Natalie Suarez, an experienced cybersecurity expert with ConnectWise, guide us through this critical information. Natalie's insights will bridge the gap between technology and human impact. In the next hour, Natalie will help unravel the intricacies of library cybersecurity. Whether you're a librarian, an IT professional, or simply curious, this webinar will explore practical strategies to shore up our digital defenses. So grab your virtual library cards and sharpen your digital pencils, and let's embark on this journey together. Natalie, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. And let's not forget, I am joined by my illustrious colleague, Dave Deckard, who he can hold his own on this subject as well. So he may chime in here from time to time. So this is me, and really the most important stuff on this is I am technical. I used to be a software developer. I am an avid book reader, so I've been in many libraries, and I just had this great thought that I should have changed one of my slides to a card catalog. I know I'm dating myself, but so heavy emphasis on that plus after the 25 plus years in IT and cybersecurity. And hopefully some of you on this call also remember the card catalog. And I'm super passionate about my family, threat intelligence, and Lego. And depending on what day it is, depends on the order. So, what are we going to talk about today? So, we're going to talk about what is cybersecurity. It's interesting. I just feel like it's one of those terms that we've heard it and said it so many times, it's almost lost its meaning. So, let's talk about what it means. I'm going to talk about cyber concerns specific to libraries. I'm going to demonstrate through PowerPoint, not through hacking anyone, a real attack that can happen and could affect your library infrastructure. We're going to talk about then afterwards how we can protect your infrastructure. We'll talk about risk and responsibility, and we'll wrap it up with a little cybersecurity story. So this is where I should have put a card catalog, right? Times have changed. I can't remember the last time I've seen a card catalog. Can you, Dave?
No, not at all.
So, we used to have card catalogs. Forget what's on this slide. We used to have card catalogs, and now everything's digital, right? So yeah, let's just all go back in our Wayback Machine to that. So what does cybersecurity mean? So I know that like me, that you love learning if you're involved in the library and you love reading, and it's important to cite our references. So I have cited here, this is the definition I received from Gartner, which they can be thought of as a kind of a think tank, kind of a Consumer Reports about all things digital and internet, even though you do have to pay to show up in this Consumer Reports. So we're not really sure how unbiased they are, but they do have a lot of great technology definitions. This is their definition of cyber, which I do agree with some of it. It definitely has to do with people, policies, processes, and technologies. It's not strictly technology focused. However, I think this is a much better definition. So, whether your business is a library or any other small to mid-sized business, cybersecurity for you is really all about managing risk. And for you, just like any other SMB or small to mid-sized business, this is a cost center. So it's only going to make sense when it's going to reduce your business risk or improve your business processes, which, believe it or not, there really are some technologies that can improve your your security processes, like a password manager. Believe it or not, if you get to know how to use one of those, it really makes your life a whole lot easier, I promise.
Natalie, too,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but yeah, just to
Oh, go
add
ahead.
to that, yeah, with that people processes and policies, but then also I think what I've seen that's very unique with the relationship between our managed service providers and their clients is that it ends up being like a shared responsibility, right? They're working together to help reduce that risk. So even though the responsibility of the data is the data owner, MSPs have an amazing job and do an amazing job providing the people processes and tools to reduce the risk and be the stewards, help be the stewards of that data.
Definitely. Most
Yeah.
definitely. Yes. I don't think our small to mid-sized businesses and organizations like libraries, which kind of fit almost, they're kind of like a combo, right, Melissa? Kind of almost government, kind of operate sometimes like a not-for-profit, with their volunteer system and stuff like that. Yeah, it's really important to have someone in your corner like, like Outsource IT Solutions Group, because they really do know their cyber stuff. And that's why they bring in people like me and Dave to reinforce and to talk to you about how they can help you and what's going on in the cyber landscape. So I was told that librarians like definitions, and I like definitions as well. So I wanted to share some with you on top of what is cybersecurity. But I wanted to make really sure that you understood like an attack or an event. That's just an attempt to bypass security. This happens continuously all the time. You can think of this as somebody, knocking on the library door when you're closed, trying to get in, jiggling that lock. So that's not a break-in. That's just an attempt, right? An incident's a little worse. This is when we actually have disruption to what we call the CIA triad. And no, that's not that scary three-letter agency we have here in the US. That would be confidentiality, integrity, and availability of an information asset. And we all know libraries are full of information assets, right? And that could be, your digital files, that could be your information on your staff or your volunteers. And a breach is actually when we can confirm that some of that data has actually ended up in the hands of someone it should not be in. And incident and breach are really legal terms. It should only be used when you can definitely qualify that that has happened. And you should qualify that by using a professional, not make that determination on your own before any forensic investigation has begun, right? So, what are some of the concerns that you might have being involved in the library scene? It makes it sound like it's really cool. I just love books. I grew up in a house, Dave, that there were books literally in every room, including the bathrooms. We have bookshelves in the bathrooms. How's that? Isn't that crazy? So I was super excited when I was like going to talk to libraries. I'm just going to geek out here, right? So, what are some of those challenges that you may have? Well, most mid-sized, small to mid-sized businesses don't have their clients or your patrons accessing your IT infrastructure. And you have that every single day. And you may even have it 24/7 because you may make some of that available online, right? Cybersecurity confusion. We already talked a little bit about this. It is so much more than an IT challenge. It's truly a business challenge. You have to understand that combination of people, process, and tech, and have someone in your corner who can help you translate all of that. And, it's probably difficult for you to manage your cybersecurity with competing priorities. You're doing research, you're finding new resources to share with your patrons. You need somebody in your corner to help think about this cybersecurity stuff because it's changing constantly. You probably have limited, if any, cyber resources directly within your organization. You may not have a written what we call a BCDR, a business continuity and disaster recovery plan, or an incident response plan in the case that something does happen. Because unfortunately, in the day and age we're living in, it's not a matter of if something's going to happen, if there's going to be an incident or a breach. Unfortunately, it's when. Think about it this way: we have to get it right every single time. The bad guy only has to get it right one time, and that just really stinks. But that's where we are in today's cyber landscape. And, with your limited funding, you want to create programs for your patrons, right? You want to have, people come in and do reading hour for, students, or do something super cool, even more cool, do reading and Lego together, right, Dave? Or maybe reading and orchestra together, right? Some really cool community events. You don't want to have to worry about the cost of recovering from an incident or a breach.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that because it's amazing how much, in terms of like even in my previous career where I was working with mental health organizations and that sort of thing, we actually had a library directly across from where we were, and it wasn't just like accessing books, right? How we
Right.
traditionally look at it, but the library was a community center where people would go for any information from how to things about their taxes to homes to school. So with the advent of IT, even back then, and it was a little longer than I want to admit, even back then, it was, where the library, had transformed into an information center well beyond just books for me, and then also too, other sorts of media from, you mentioned music. That was actually where I used to go
Yeah.
to grab my first records back in the day.
Yeah.
I think the thing is that it's amazing how the libraries have transformed and how they get
Oh,
utilized
yeah.
almost as more than they used to.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I mean, I think of my library as a community center. I'm going to date myself again. I have a granddaughter who just loves to go to the library when they have special events and have people read to the kids. It's just such an awesome opportunity, such an awesome service that they offer. That, music, videos. I mean, I remember getting VHS tapes from the library.
Sure.
At least I didn't say beta, right? So, what are some of these industries that are consistently under attack? You'll see I've highlighted education and government. I mean, you guys kind of fall in that area: education, government, not for profit. Not for profits also in the top 10, but it looked much better just to have 5 on the slide. So here we go. And, honestly, you are targets. Libraries are targets. Um, there have been incidents that I have heard of tangentially through some of our MSP partners where there have been libraries that have had ransomware attacks. And in some of those cases, those libraries were unprepared. They didn't have incident response plans or good backups or things like that. And those things are really important along with insurance. But we'll talk a little bit more about defense in depth later. But 82% of ransomware attacks target organizations like you. Just gosh, 5 years ago, you weren't at the top of the stack as far as ransomware. So I do like, again, to show my research, right? So here's some more research. I'm sure most of you are very familiar with Verizon, even though you may not realize that they put out this data breach investigations report. And they're saying that the 3 ways these bad guys, or we call them threat actors, the way these threat actors get in is that they either have credentials, it may be a phishing email, which is when they trick you into scanning or opening something you shouldn't scan or open. Um, yeah, and exploit vulnerabilities, which is simply, the simplest one is a flaw in software. And it could be a flaw in software because a software developer made a mistake, or it could be a flaw because things have changed and technology has changed, and something that wasn't bad, a few years ago with legacy software now is a bad thing, right? So I want to see how many people are awake here. So I can see the chat. I can see all of you. And I want to know from you, what percentage of breaches do you think involve the human element? And that's just, a human being in general. So I'll give you a couple seconds there. We need to cue some Jeopardy music. You don't want me to sing to you, that's for sure. Okay, it feels like much longer to me. So, spoiler alert. 74% of all breaches include the human element. B, yes, we do have some correct answers. Yes, it is definitely the human element. And, some cybersecurity people would say, hey, we're the weakest link. And I would challenge you that we're not the weakest link. We're your first line of defense. And that's why things like security awareness training are so important. And we're actually doing better. Look, we're down from 82% from the previous year. So I feel that's good news. That's almost 10%. So let's take it as a win, right? So how have things changed? How many of you, and you are, I don't know if you're able to raise your hand or not. I don't know. Well, let's just pretend. Okay, so how many of you, oh, you are. How many of you are familiar with ransomware as a service, have heard of that before? And I don't expect it to be even half of you. So if you have heard of it, if you want to raise your hand, please do so. Okay, we got one brave soul out there, and her name's Natalie too. So that's awesome. Hey, Natalie. Um, so basically, these bad guys. So think of a threat actor like Lockbit, which we supposedly just took down. For them, it's more of a speed bump. I can assure you, they'll be back with a vengeance. But they have what they call an affiliate program. Isn't that cute? They call them affiliates. Their affiliates are wannabe bad guys. So back in my day, if you wanted to be a bad guy, you had to understand networks and network protocols. You had to be a software developer. Well, those days are long gone, guys. And guys includes all of us. Those days are long gone. Now, groups like Lockbit, which is a prolific threat actor that we disrupted, I'm going to say disrupted, not taken down, that we disrupted. And then through their affiliate program, they can have people access the dark web and go to one of their forums or their website and purchase whatever their heart desires, like ransomware as a service, phishing as a service, lots of other services. And anyone on this call, I guarantee you, with a quick Google search and the watching of a YouTube video could very quickly figure out how to get to the dark web. Not super complicated. And also, all you need is that and to know how to get some cryptocurrency. And they'll provide anything you need. They'll provide training on their services. They have a model where they help you do it. They have a model where they just support you and you do it yourself. Sounds familiar, doesn't it, Dave? And they even have help desks. They are true enterprises. So that has super lowered the barrier to being a bad guy or a threat actor. And unfortunately, the news isn't super good. Even if you do pay one of these bad guys, guess what? The investigators found when, so let's Lockbit, ransom some people, right? Encrypted some files. And when they encrypted the files, they said, hey, Mr. Business or Mrs. Business, if you pay me, I'll delete your data. And people paid and were told their data was deleted. Dave, what do you think that the FBI found when they got hold of Lockbits? Do you think that data was deleted? Do you think the bad guy was true to their word? No, they were not true to their word. It's like, that was a trick question. I knew you were going to answer it right. And even if they give you the decryption key, the chances of getting your data back are slim to none. Only 4% of affected companies, and that includes libraries, recover all of their data after paying a ransom. And that is way down from the year before. Way down. And it's so much more. Go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say too, for this particular crowd, even there actually is a book that came out in 2016 called Future Crimes. As it was written by Mark Goodman, and the crazy thing is that the advent of this and
Mhm.
some of the ransomware as a service and these as a service criminal organizations, he was writing about this all the way back in 2016,
Mhm.
how it was starting to develop. So you sort of think about it. If this
Mhm.
type of enterprise kind of started and was really starting to gain momentum all the way back in 2016, how advanced and how nuanced has it become to where it basically functions as a legitimate business just in the dark web?
It is. You're right.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it is. And, in some cases, they're even skipping the encryption altogether. They're just going to the rest of this quadruple extortion, right? Launching a distributed denial of service attack against you. Imagine how it would be if neither you nor your patrons could access your digital infrastructure. Um, Data theft, taking your data, whether it is online resources that you have or that employee information, your staff or volunteer information that you have, and even going further and calling your patrons and saying, hey, I got your data from the library. This is what I have. And then, we don't want to, there is this aspect of harming your reputation in the community as a safe place to be, and you really don't want to mess that up. I mean, I'm like I said, I'm an avid reader. I read everything. And you don't want people be discouraged from using their local library, whether it's in person or digitally. So these are some of the things going on in the cyber landscape. Social media, I can assure you many of your patrons are using social media there in the library. Um, you know, they may be using things like AI, Chat GPT. There's some interesting things going on with that. And you have to be worried about not just your staff and your volunteers, but you have to be worried about your patrons too, and want to make sure that they are protected when they're using your infrastructure. You can see here, I have a couple of the good news stories about people being arrested in Lockbit. The data breaches at ChatGPT and the ones that have happened at Facebook, those are very concerning. They should be concerning to you because you may have colleagues or volunteers that are using that same username and password that they're using to access your infrastructure to maybe do use their social media or use ChatGPT. And that's why security awareness training is so important, and the use of password managers, because that can avoid that. Because what happens is, say I'm using my employee login or my patron login for the library as the same thing for my social media, right? And then that's breached, like you see the story here in ChatGPT. And then what happens is those credentials end up in a database or her file, even just a plain old file on the dark web, and somebody buys that. And then what they do is they use automated means. They don't sit there in their basement eating, Cheetos and drinking Mountain Dew or Twizzlers or whatever, um, banging on a keyboard. They are actually automating and trying to break into your infrastructure using that information they found on the dark web, right? And also, I mean, you don't want your patrons or your colleagues to be subject to something like these pig butchering kits, which are sold as a service on the dark web. Pig butchering is where they particularly target the elderly. So maybe part of your community outreach could be providing information on some of this to maybe some of your elderly population. And what they do is it's usually a romance scam. That's what pig butchering is. They fatten the pig and then they butcher it. And the way they do this is they build that relationship. They think they have a real relationship, and then they convince them to invest in something, and they really milk their entire life savings away from them. It's a very sad and evil and just horrible thing that happens. That's one of the things that happens from the dark web. Um, so this is interesting information on the percentage of attacks by global region. So I want you to see here that 70.4% of attacks are actually happening in North America. That includes our neighboring countries of Canada and Mexico, right? And I wanted you to see this first before I pop up that next quiz question. So, what percentage of the world's internet usage do you think comes from North America? So you saw that almost 75% of the attacks are against targets in North America. And I would imagine that a large percentages of those are the US in general. I know for a fact they are. It's just not part of that source that I cited there. But what percentage of the internet usage do you think that comes from North America? I don't know if Melissa looked at the slides. I should call on her. Melissa's like, no, it's okay, Melissa.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Brian Bruns and say B.
Okay. Well, you guys are going to be shocked then, because it is not. It is, hold on, where did US go? US is like Africa, Asia, Europe. I lost it.
Oh
It's like this, hold on, 11.2 is Africa, Europe is 13.9, that 54.2 is Asia, we're 6.5.
no. 6.5.
I can't believe I cut that off. Yeah, I know I had to do that by process of
Okay, well, which
elimination.
answer was 6.5? Which letter?
C.
Letter C? I have no one with letter C. I got no winners here.
Yeah, I know. 6.5%. Can you believe that?
No,
And
I'm
look at
shocked.
that. 70%, almost 3quarters of the traffic
Oh,
is North America, but the usage wise, it's only 6.5%. Yeah.
oh,
Isn't
crazy.
that crazy? And this link right here, if you want to share this deck with your participants, Melissa, you can, and they can click on these links. These charts and this information is really cool at this site. So you all knew this was coming. So this is a personal and professional passion of mine. And as librarians, you probably know because you've probably seen the books and the research papers that AI isn't new. And it's not really intelligent either, is it? But it's just new for the masses. And you could think of it this way. AI is to today what the internet was to the 90s. And, so as far as a library, how should you be concerned about AI use? Well, you should be providing guidelines to your colleagues and patrons, so they know how to responsibly use AI. You shouldn't allow, any private information that you may hold, like private information on your employee demographics or maybe even your community demographics. Some of that might be more sensitive, sharing stuff like that. Samsung actually lost some very important private information because of the way they were allowing their employees to use AI. And another thing you want to educate both your patrons and your colleagues on is that AI generated responses are not necessarily fact, right? A lot of this information, well, these are what we call large language models. And what they do is they scoop up all this information from the internet. And let's think about this for a moment. We know that everything on the internet's true, right? Yeah. Melissa's like, no.
It's that wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Nudge, nudge. No. And and this is a good time to educate your patrons and your colleagues on fact checking. How do I check and make sure this information that this AI gave me is really genuine? I listen to many podcasts when I'm driving. I was listening to one earlier. I was re-listening to one that I had marked as being interesting, but I don't think I had enough time to really pay attention to it before. And they were talking about how in a production for a podcast, how much research and time actually went into creating it and how they've really shortened that time with AI, but they still have to fact check and be careful, right? That the fact checkers haven't lost their job. They just do their job in a different way, right? And for you guys, it's really transforming the way you know better than most small to mid-sized business how it's transforming the way you operate. Providing personalized recommendations, totally enhancing your patron and user experience, optimizing your resource management. Really and truly, it really has got to be very revolutionary in the library world, AI and these GPTs like Chat GPT and others. So I promised you I was going to demonstrate an attack. So I want to show you this attack. And this could happen either to a colleague or volunteer or even a patron in the library. And the important thing is the way they get in is sometimes depending on what the target here, in this case, the target or the fake the fake website is kind of office.com, but sometimes even if a threat actor could trick a patron, like I said, some of these bad guys are super smart. There's unfortunately a lot of them are just buying the stuff with crypto, but there's still these really smart and financially motivated guys like Lockbit and other threat actor groups that it really isn't out of the question to think even if they pop a computer that a patron is using, that they couldn't traverse into your actual infrastructure, into your corporate infrastructure or your colleague infrastructure. So you should always keep that in mind and remain vigilant. Remember when I said we're our best defense, humans are the best defense? That includes all of you on this call. And again, you're in an interesting position as an educational institution where you could even do a community event around this and share information like this with your patrons. I don't really get to say that a lot when I'm talking to other types of businesses. So in this attack, what happens is we call this an actor in the middle attack. And that's why we've got the bad guy in the hoodie there in the middle, because all the bad guys wear black hoodies, right? Even though I have a black hoodie and I'm not a bad guy. And what happens in this case is we have a user. They're trying to get to office.com. And the reason they are is because they've received a phishing email from Mr. Bad Guy here. And Mr. Bad Guy has set up this phishing website. And the reason he's in the middle is because it's an actor in the middle. And I'm just calling him a he just to simplify it, because statistically it probably is a he, just like statistically I would probably be a he talking to you, but I'm not. So anyway, so what happens is this user, Bob, for argument's sake, hopefully no one's named Bob. That's just a totally fictitious story here. Bob gets an email, and the email's from Microsoft, right? And it says, hey, Bob, your credentials have been compromised. Your username and password have been compromised, and you need to click here right now to change your password. So first piece of advice I'm going to give you here from a user training perspective, you should train all your users and all your patrons that you do not click a link or a QR code or open a document unless you know the sender and you're expecting the information. And in some industries, that's kind of hard, but I think it should be kind of good for you guys. So if you get an email, both the sender has to be known and you were expecting the information. And the reason I say both of those things is because it could really be from your sender, but what if your sender's been compromised because they clicked on something they shouldn't have? So those are the two easiest things to remember, because everyone may not remember to mouse over the from address and see if it's a real from address. In this case, it's obviously a phishing email, not really from Microsoft. So what happens is Bob gets this email. I want to point out some stuff. We used to say back in the day, if you didn't have a security certificate warning in your little browser window, that little symbol in the upper, whatever, left, right, wherever it's at these days, I don't even pay attention to them anymore. And it said that the certificate was valid and there was no certificate errors of any kind, that you were safe. We no longer say that. And the reason is that's what these TLS encrypted curved lines here are at the bottom, is that means all that means is the information between the user and the attacker is encrypted, and the information between the attacker and office.com is encrypted. Does it mean that the encryption can't be broken? No, but that doesn't matter in this case. All it means is the data is all encrypted. And the other thing to note is this actor in the middle. I am going to greatly simplify this. So if you are technical, this is not 1000% accurate, but it's the best simplification for this explanation. This phishing website acts as a proxy server, and all a proxy server does is take information from one location and it forwards it to another location. And with that, so unfortunately, Bob clicks on this email because he didn't listen to the rule. And when he clicked on this email, his username and password that are encrypted went to the bad guy's website. And the bad guy forwarded those to office.com. It doesn't even matter if the bad guy could decrypt it. He doesn't in this case, okay? So maybe at this point, another thing that's really important is to have a good culture of cybersecurity where people feel safe reporting if they made a mistake. So maybe Bob did have training and he was just in a hurry, and he clicked on something and then went, "Oh, I shouldn't have clicked on that." And he goes and he reports to the correct person, "Hey, I clicked on something." And then you could mitigate that attack right then and there and stop it. And in this case, if Bob stopped right there, the attacker would not get the information that he needs. But unfortunately, Bob did not get the memo, and Office.com does what it's supposed to do because Bob has multi-factor authentication set up because his library requires it. So let's just say he's a staff member at the library, and his library requires multi-factor authentication for their email. And so he gets prompted for that. Again, that goes through the phishing website. It proxies that information back to the user, and then the user puts in their MFA credentials. And it doesn't matter if the user got a code on their phone or if they used an app to do it. The method doesn't really matter at this point as far as those goes. There are some phishing resistant methods, but that is another webinar. So the phishing site forwards that information to Microsoft.com or Office.com, and it goes, "I got a good username, I got a good password, I got my multi-factor authentication, this is Bob." So because Microsoft or Office thinks it's Bob, they return something called a session cookie. Now, this is the bad part. Now what happens is this attacker now has everything he needs to be Bob. And if you think about this, this has changed from the good old days too, right? In the good old days, your username and password for your email was just your username and password for your email. Today, with Office or Google or whatever you use, it's access to your files, your maybe your SharePoint files, files shared with others in the corporation, or other people from the library have shared with you, as well as the email. Now, I'm not showing you this because multi-factor authentication is bad. It's not. Multi-factor authentication is super duper important. I'm showing you this because protection requires defense in depth. It requires multiple things. There are many different technologies, including a managed detection and response or security information and event management system that could help detect this attack. Actually, the best defense would have been security awareness training or that culture of cybersecurity. That would have stopped this bad guy in his tracks. But unfortunately, we don't have time to explain all of that on this webinar either. But what should you do to prevent attacks like this and others? Well, part of that defense in depth means that you should, just like I told you in the beginning, you should consider aspects of people, process, and technology. Say you're buying new computer systems at the library, right? And, so you're expecting to get an invoice from somebody. Okay, so you get an invoice from who you think. So this particular vendor ABC, because I'm super creative, right? So vendor ABC sends you the invoice and says, "Here's our invoice. And oh, by the way, our payment instructions have changed." And Bob's in accounting now. And Bob in accounting gets that and he pays the invoice. And he goes, "God, that seems like an awful lot for that," but he pays it anyway. And guess what? That wasn't a real invoice. And why did Bob pay that huge invoice that didn't seem reasonable? Because maybe Bob wasn't trained properly. There definitely wasn't any correct process for how, if we get an unexpected invoice with a weird amount, that we should check with maybe procurement, or we should check with somebody else in the library. There should be some procedure for that. But he definitely had the technology because he sent that money. And that's an example of what can happen if you don't have the correct people, process, and tech in place. One of many examples. Remember I told you about defense in depth? This is what it looks like from a technology perspective. I mentioned managed detection and response. That's when you have a security operations center and you have something on your desktops called endpoint detection and response. Simple terms, you can think of that as next generation antivirus. It works on user behaviors or software behaviors. So if Bob were to get a malicious PDF and he clicked on it, and that PDF or that Word doc or that Google doc goes and tries to launch a software process, whether Bob is a patron or a colleague in this case, that piece of software would stop that execution of malware in its tracks. A security information and event management system that looks at your greater infrastructure, whether your infrastructure is all cloud-based, like Azure and AWS, or whether it's on-prem types of computers and servers and things like that. Access management, that is knowing who should have access to what, and what systems should have access to what and at what level. Obviously, security awareness training, foundational things like domain name service and web filtering, keeping people from going to inappropriate sites or downloading things like Tor browsers, which you may use to get to the dark web, right? And that, again, this business continuity and disaster recovery, which includes, of course, things like backups, which, oh, by the way, in the case that I know of, the library did not have a backup. So they had to manually, they lost everything and had to start over, basically, whatever was not archived somewhere else or easily accessible. And in order to get comprehensive, affordable, and reputable cyber insurance, you have to have all of these things. Remember, that's only if you want all three of those. Can you get cyber insurance without having all of these things? Yes, you can. But I guarantee you it will not be comprehensive, affordable, and reputable. So I think, Dave, you kind of alluded to this earlier. We were talking about risk and responsibility. This is a circle. We're all in this together. You leaders in the libraries, you're the data owners, you're the data stewards, the data librarians, a way to say it. And you own the liability because you understand what's in your library, what information you have as far as your staff, what information you have for the public, what private information you have or protected information you have. And we're going to come alongside you as the IT and information security teams and make sure you have the right solutions deployed, make sure you have the right security awareness training, make sure you have the right cybersecurity protections, and we're going to give you the information that you need on risk mitigation. But ultimately, all individuals have a different risk tolerance. So what may be correct for one library isn't necessarily going to be correct cyber-wise for another library. Again, why you need to work with a professional.
Hey, Natalie, too, one thing you had
Yeah.
mentioned about the insurance thing, I was on mute accidentally,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I wanted to mention this too. So I actually had a conversation with insurance company to find out, like, what was the deal? Why was it that, cyber insurance, having all of these different tools and people, processes, and technology in place would help lower or make a organization more insurable? And really what it came down to was, when you look at how things have evolved from,
Mhm.
back in the day when we just had antivirus and thought we were okay,
Right.
maybe antivirus and a firewall, right? If you
Yep.
look at insurance, fire insurance has been fire insurance since fire insurance, right? It hasn't evolved, right?
Right.
But what happened with insurance companies was they were actually putting out these sort of like what they called like vendor insurance policies, where they were like, oh, you need cyber insurance, here you go. And they gave it to you. The problem was that the cyber environment is changing so much that the exceptions are like almost weekly, if not bi-weekly,
Oh,
to
yeah.
what they have to watch out for. So all of these people, processes, and tools that you've alluded to in being able to protect the data, what they do is if you fill out that inventory, underwriter looks at it and goes, okay, they're on the ball. This will be easy. And up to the top you go, makes you much more insurable. Now, if you don't have those things, what complicates that is that now they have to take, one underwriter, maybe a second underwriter to take a look at it. And then that's when it slows down the process and also increases cost.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. That is exactly true. This is a very rapidly evolving landscape. Yep. Oop. Okay. Another quiz. I forgot about this quiz. Surprise!
Pop quiz.
So I know, surprise. A lot of times, and even in especially in a library situation, they're like, well, why would our data be worth anything? And I'm here to tell you, your data has worth. There's definitely worth to your data, especially when you have patrons there. Patrons could be working on their bank account, right? They could be purchasing things with their credit cards. Maybe they're filling out some job applications or some information that, has some private information like their social security number. For simplicity's sake, I see we have some people playing here, which really encourages me. Thank you for participating. So which of the things on the left do you think matches with C, which is only $1 per item on the dark web? And which of these things on the left matches with E, which is the highest dollar and the highest dollar amount we have on the right-hand side? So I'll give you just a second here. Anybody want to play this game?
Yes, yes, we want to play.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. You are correct. A social security number is only worth $1. But you know what? Um, is someone cheating? No, you're not cheating. You're close, but not exactly. So actually, it's access to corporate network that's 2 to 4K. And that is because that is an average, remember, depending on what exactly that corporation does or what exactly that library does, it could be worth more or it could be worth less. But if you think about that, if I'm just a wannabe bad guy and I just want to test the waters, that's not a whole heck of a lot of change, right? If I have the potential to make a whole bunch of money, I'm doing this only automated, all automated, I'm probably willing to put up 2 to 4K to get access to your corporate network, your library network, and see what I could do. I love that chat GPT. I do have my references here. I knew with the library crowd that I better have my references straight. And what I was going to say too is, our social security number is only worth $1. But again, I'm going to date myself. I never had a social security number till I was 15. Now you get them at birth. And if you want to be shocked to death, Google how much an infant's social security number is worth. It's crazy money. And no, I'm not encouraging you to have children and sell their social security numbers. What I'm encouraging you to do is to lock your children's social security reports so you don't have any awful surprises when they turn, 15, 16, 17, 18, and then want to start, working on their credit. You can lock it with the major reporting agencies. Super easy to do. So I have a little analogy. I'm going to go through it kind of fast because we've had good conversation. So everybody's familiar with a library, right? We've all been to a library, right? So I'm going to talk about cybersecurity in terms of a library. I thought that was a gorgeous library. So in your library, the first thing you have to do is identify what you want to protect. You want to protect your colleagues and patrons. You want to protect your books, your media, your electronics, your computers. How do you protect them? You have doors and windows. You have locks, education, security awareness training, perhaps, or education on making sure people know how to set the alarm and lock up when they're the last one there, right? Security signs that may say protected by ADT or Brinks. How do you detect when someone gets past your defenses? An alarm, a motion sensor, cameras, neighborhood watch. I know that we have we have libraries where I live in neighborhoods with people, so people would see that. How would you respond if something happened? You might have security guards. You might decide it's too dangerous and run away. You may call the authorities, or you may have to protect yourself with a baseball bat or some microfiche. I don't know. And I'm going to round this recover back to cybersecurity. So how do you recover? An incident response plan. It's much better to know what you're going to do in the event that something happens ahead of time. You don't want to be planning your response during the fire, right? Business continuity, disaster recovery. It may, cyber attacks can have a kinetic effect. Think of Stuxnet, where we took Iranian centrifuges offline and destroyed them when they were trying to enrich uranium. That was a cyber attack that did that. Think of a cyber attack on a water supply system happened in here in Tampa a few years ago, where a bad guy tried to poison the water supply and it was detected. Insurance. I'm sure you dealing with the public, you have to have liability insurance. And you should also have cyber insurance. And then again, cyber can have a kinetic effect. It might require emergency equipment or incident responders or you know, or incident responders that do the forensics on a cyber attack, right? And I want to leave you with this. I shared a ton of info, Remember I told you I used to be a software developer? I'm sure Dave is so sick of this story, but I used to have a boss who used to tell me, perfect is the enemy of done. I was a team of software developers. We would compete with each other to do just one up each other. And sometimes he'd have to go, time out, guys. Perfect is the enemy of done. Looked it up. It's a Voltaire quote, philosopher quote, seems very apropos for an audience of librarians and library involved individuals. It is a philosopher quote, the perfect is the enemy of the good. All that to tell you is that I know I shared a lot of info. Your head may be exploding, and then you may be thinking of all the research you have to do on this. But guess what? You don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to compete to be at the head of the line or to get everything perfectly done. You just have to start somewhere. Where should you start? Do a risk assessment with outsource IT solutions group, and they will help you create a roadmap, figure out where you start. Even if all you do is start with a review of like your incident response plan or, your security awareness training, there's huge bang for your buck for things like that. And then just start deploying those technologies that go with that people training and those processes and policies to help support and protect your environment and protect your patrons. And with that, if we have any other questions, because I see some of you are very chatty, I'd love to entertain any questions. And Brian, I see that ChatGPT let you down. I guess you didn't have time to do your research there. So no one faults you there. But also the data does vary by source. So I tried to get it from sources that I knew were very reputable. So you may find a little bit of squishiness in some of that data, but shouldn't find anything, crazily off from what I provided.
I want to thank you so much, Natalie and Dave, both. I have not seen any questions as of yet. I'm watching to see if there's any others, but we appreciate everyone taking time out of their busy day to join us. Safeguarding patron data and maintaining trust is crucial. Let's stay vigilant and protect our digital spaces. Outsource is looking forward to holding additional webinars in the future surrounding many different IT-related topics. And some of them geared specifically towards libraries. And with that, I think we can wrap this up and call it a day.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Bye,
All right.
everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.